your man, Louie T. Welcome to the 2021 NFL Draft Wrap-Up Series here on the Louie T Network. I, of course, am your set man, Louie T. Thank you for joining me as we go through all 32 teams in the National Football League's 2021 NFL Draft using our grading scale. From 5 to 1, we will grade each and every single selection made by each team in the draft, 5 being the highest, 1 being the lowest score a pick can receive. We will tally up those scores at the very end, divide by the number of picks, which will yield us a final overall grade and score for that team's draft. This is the You Pick format, so simply be the first to leave a comment in the comment section of this and future videos in the series stating 2 things: the phrase next and the team you'd like to see next. So some examples would be Giants next, next NY, next G-Men. You get where I'm going with this. As a matter of fact, the next team up in the series is none other than the New York Football Giants, the G-Men. And Dave Gettleman has been an embattled GM in New York with this Giants organization for the last 2 or 3 years now. I think he's been in New York a total of maybe 5 or 6. But the last couple have been rough, and he's been on the hot seat, proverbially the hot seat. I think more so in the media and with fans, the perception is he's been on the hot seat. I don't know if he's actually ever been close to being canned or not. That said, he's made some controversial picks. The free agency period hasn't always been the best. I haven't been the biggest fan of Dave Gettleman throughout his career. That's been noted. If you've watched my channel for any amount of time, you know, going back to his days in Carolina, I wasn't the biggest and still am not the biggest Dave Gettleman fan. That being said, this has been the best offseason I've ever seen Dave Gettleman have as a GM, and that goes back to his days in Carolina as well. I thought this was a spectacular offseason for the Giants. Some of the past off seasons felt forced. There were a couple of moves that I didn't necessarily agree with, felt like they were out of necessity. And sometimes when you make moves out of necessity, you can make mistakes and have missteps. And I thought there were a couple of those along the way. Maybe the one thing Giants fans might be able to complain about is the offensive line and not doing more there, and especially after releasing Kevin Zeitler, maybe. But obviously, the key this offseason was to get Daniel Jones the necessary weaponry for him to take the next step and prove that he belongs. And if he can't do it, then they need to find that out as well. And they're going to find that out this year. With all the moves made in free agency and now this draft, I think they've put him in a position to succeed. And I think they've also gotten better on the defensive side of the football as well. So this is not a very deep draft class for the Giants in terms of the amount of selections, but I think what you get here is quality over quantity, which has always been one of the staples of a Dave Gettleman draft. He's not a guy that usually takes 9-10 players like he did last year. That was a rare draft for him. If you go back to his days in Carolina, 5-6 players, 7-player drafts, but more likely than not 5 or 6 guys. And that's what this is, a 6-player draft. As you see all 6 of them on the screen in front of you, we'll break them down here quickly and get in and out. I've already broken some of these players down, so you won't get a thorough breakdown of some of these guys. If you're looking for that, you'll have to go to their draft prospects video and breakdown, and I will leave the links in the comment section. I will pin that comment in the comment section of this video if you want to go back and watch those videos. But without any further ado, let's get to this Giants 2021 NFL Draft wrap-up, and we start in the first round, 20th pick overall, wide receiver out of Florida. Kadarius Toney is the pick, and this was a unique pick for Dave Gettleman. Why? Because there was much made about him not trading back ever in his draft history, and so he put that to rest. He talked about how it's never been a situation where that's not his philosophy of not wanting to trade, but rather it really just has never materialized, whether the opportunity wasn't there and it didn't present itself or the compensation wasn't right. Whatever the case may be, he felt like this was the right opportunity. He moved back from 11, allowed the Bears to come up and select Justin Fields. He goes back to 20 and selects Kadarius Toney. Now, there's a lot of discussion about this pick and how it came to be. There was a sense that the Giants were really interested in selecting Alabama wide receiver, the Heisman Trophy winner Devontae Smith. And then the Eagles catapulted the Giants from 12 to 10 with the Cowboys, and they flip-flopped and they jumped in front of the Giants and got Devontae Smith. And that prompted the Giants to then say, okay, really nothing here for us. The guy that we really want is now gone. We're going to move out of this pick. There was a conversation to be had amongst fans, especially that Rashawn Slater was sitting there. You could use an upgrade on the offensive line. Why not take him? That's not what Gettleman wanted to do. He wanted to get another weapon for Daniel Jones, and that's what he did at 20 in Kadarius Toney. So he was definitely plan B. He was not plan A for the Giants, but this is a dynamic football player that's going to come in here and give you some juice, something that you lacked on the offensive side of the football at the receiver position in particular. Evan Ingram was probably, outside of Saquon Barkley, your fastest offensive player, which that can't be the case. Slayton's probably faster than Ingram, if I had to guess, but he was dealing with a myriad of injuries last year, and when he wasn't healthy, there was no speed to speak of on this Giants offense. That's changed with the addition of John Ross and now Kadarius Toney also being in the mix. I'll read you his analysis, but this is a guy that I've already broken down already. So if you're looking for his breakdown, again, I will pin the comment in the comment section, and you can check out his draft prospects 101 breakdown. But Kadarius Toney is electric with the ball in his hands and even shows toughness and above average contact balance, finding his way through seemingly impossible hordes of defenders en route to pay dirt. His quick and shifty nature suits him well inside as a slot receiver that can win the underneath one-on-ones or take it deep as well. While he is limited in his ability to run routes as an all-around wide receiver, he makes up for what he lacks with all-around value. Whether he has the ball or not, defenses have to account for him, and Toney even adds special teams value. For Toney, the real question becomes, can he continue to grow as a wide receiver? Or is the 2020 season in college football his ceiling in that capacity, and some team maximize his value as a playmaker? So essentially, can he continue to grow? I think he's just scratching the surface as a wide receiver. Or is he going to be put in a box to be a underneath guy and then a deep threat that has gadget ability? Like, can he become an all-around wide receiver that can run routes and win at all three levels? Or is it just something short underneath? Or is it something deep? And then you just get it in his hands as a gadget guy. Is he going to be limited to just doing really three things on the field? Short underneath, deep, and then gadget. You know, jet sweep, some kind of toss out of the backfield, some kind of unique way to get him the rock. Is that all he's going to become? So I'm really fascinated by Kadarius Toney because 2020 was a phenomenal year, and he's really for all intents and purposes, a one-year wonder at Florida. When you look at his statistics, when you look at his career at Florida, there was no other season that you can sink your teeth into and say, hey, this is a guy that we feel like has immense potential. It's only 2020 that you see it in. And that's what the Giants are banking on, that he's going to continue to build off of the 2020 campaign and just get better and better. And we'll see if he does that or not. But whatever the case may be, he's dynamic. He's electric. I love what he brings to the table. And I love what he brings to the table for this particular team that lacked the kind of speed you need to change games. Other than Darius Slayton, they didn't have a guy that could stretch the football field vertically. Now they have multiple guys, including Kadarius Toney in the first round, 20th pick overall. Wide receiver out of Florida, Kadarius Toney, for me, is a 5. Not only did you get great value here at 20, this was right around where I thought he should go, but you traded back, picked up some additional draft capital, and were able to get plan B. This wasn't plan A for the Giants, but it doesn't matter. It's still plan B, and they were able to execute plan B beautifully in securing Kadarius Toney. As we move on to the second selection in this draft for the Giants, second round, 50th overall pick, edge rusher out of Georgia, Aziz Ogilari is the pick. Here's a guy that is extremely raw, but has some ability to turn the corner, flatten, and get to the quarterback, and that's something that the Giants lacked. I thought that, when this process first started, I thought the Giants were going to go after edge rusher in free agency first. I thought they were going to go after edge rusher after not really coming away with anything dynamic in the edge rushing department in free agency. I thought they were going to attack edge rusher in the draft. This just wasn't a draft that forced you to go after someone early on, and you saw that. There was no top 10 edge rusher for the first time in a long time. I can't remember the last time we've had a draft where there wasn't a top 10 edge rusher. And I don't know if we got one until the Dolphins at 18, I believe. So this wasn't a draft where you needed to reach for an edge rusher early, and they didn't. And they got a guy that's going to come in and have a chance to make an immediate impact on a defense that needs some outside edge rushing presence. And I've already broken down Aziz Ogilari, so I'm not going to do that here. Again, much like I talked about with Kadarius Toney, you're looking for his thorough breakdown, go to the comment section of this video. I will pin the comment with Aziz Ogilari's draft wrap-up series, or excuse me, draft prospects 101 breakdown. But I will read my analysis of him quickly before we move on. Aziz Ogilari is an interesting player because he can do multiple things: drop into coverage, set the edge in the run game, rush the passer. But what he probably does best is get after the quarterback. Ogilari's ability to dip his shoulder and flatten to the quarterback is a trait that few in the collegiate ranks can pull off, and he can also add some more technique and moves to his rush. Ogilari could be a true difference maker at the next level. While his length isn't ideal for a 3-4 outside linebacker, that's where Ogilari seems most comfortable, in a two-point stance. So we'll see where he lands, how he is utilized, and how he develops. These are all keys to his success. So for me, Ogilari is a guy that has a lot of workable traits. He isn't the dynamic pass rusher that you are looking for, but why can't he be like a guy that came from this same exact school over a decade ago in Justin Houston, that was selected in the 3rd round? Why can't he be one of those types of players? And like I said, he's got the ability to be a difference maker at the next level. So I'm interested in his development and to see what he does with this Giants football team. And there's already a stud inside in Williams that you were able to re-sign in the offseason. And if you can get now some edge rushing presence off the edge on the outside, that would really drastically change the face of this Giants defense, because really that's all this defense is missing at this point, is some production off the edges. They don't really have that right now. They've got a secondary that's one of the better ones on paper in the league. You've gotten some quality snaps out of your linebacking position, specifically Blake Martinez. Now you need, and your defensive line is stout. You've drafted well. You got Leonard Williams. It's a really good group up front. Now what you have to get to complete this defense is some edge rushing presence. You're hoping Aziz Ogilari and some of the guys you drafted in past years, like the kid out of Old Dominion a year ago, O'Shane Eximinis, all of these guys start to really give you something. We'll see what Aziz Ogilari is able to bring to the table, but I like where you got him. And this was a guy that in many mocks was a late 1st, early 2nd. I had a 2nd round grade on him. I think I was one of the people that had him late 1st, early 2nd. I thought he was more of a 2nd round pick myself. To get him mid to late 2nd, you got to feel like that's a really good get if you're the Giants. Here in the 2nd round, 50th overall selection, edge rusher out of Georgia, Aziz Ogilari for me is a 4. I think this is a guy that fits a need, gives you some good quality depth on the edge rushing front. Another guy to throw in the mix and see if you can't get something out of him. And I thought this was a great value pick at 50, getting a guy that I thought was going to be gone somewhere in the 30s. So we move on to the Giants' 3rd pick in this draft. 3rd round, 71st overall, cornerback or defensive back out of UCF, Aaron Robinson is the pick. This is a guy that is 5'11", $186. So some of the measurements and things that you see in front of you were done pre-processed. So before all of these pro days took place, there was no combine. Normally I get height, weight, and all of that good stuff, speed from the combine. Wasn't able to do that this year, so had to go off of the programs that the schools provide, which is usually false, for lack of a better word. It's usually an exaggeration and a fabrication, and it's usually to benefit the players. If you're 5'9", they're going to list you at 5'11" or 6 feet. And then when you finally get measured, that's when we find out, oh, this guy, he looked a lot smaller. Well, that's because he is smaller. So 5'11", 186 for Aaron Robinson. Not too far off there. I'll give you some quick numbers over the life of his career. In 29 games, he had 104 tackles, 6.5 tackles for loss, 2 forced fumbles, 17 pass breakups, and 3 interceptions. All 3 of those interceptions coming in one season. That was in 2019. He is a transfer from Alabama, so he had to sit out a season, but he came over from Alabama and played his best ball at UCF in 2019 for the most part. So his strengths, good athleticism and short area quickness. This is a guy that at his pro day ran a 4.39 and had a 37-inch vertical. So you see some of the explosiveness there. I love the fact that he's able to change directions very seamlessly, can get out of his breaks, is able to change direction, stop, turn, and go much faster than slow. So that short area quickness is a necessity, especially if you're going to do much of your work in the slot, which I perceive him to be more of a slot guy than a boundary corner. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. Closing speed and change of direction is another strength. He's a guy that has that acceleration to run down a shallow cross, for instance. He does a tremendous job, and I'll talk about that here in a second, of navigating through traffic. When you get all these crossing routes, these man beaters underneath where you get a bunch of traffic and them trying to run rub routes. So you get these shallow cross, these mesh routes and things of that nature, and all this traffic. He does a great job of sorting through that, running around this shallow route, going over the top of this defender, going underneath this to stay in phase or stay close enough, and then he drives on the football. So that shallow cross looks open. By the time that receiver gets the ball in his hands, Aaron Robinson is up his back and looking to make a tackle or make a play on the football. So he's got an outstanding closing speed and good change of direction. He's able to flip his hips, open up, and go, and not waste a lot of motion, not take any false steps. So there's a good change of direction there with Aaron Robinson. Outstanding pursuit angles and traffic navigation, and I just talked about that. You see it most notably when he's underneath in coverage, man-to-man, and they're running those mesh concepts, those underneath shallow routes where there's a bunch of traffic. They're trying to get guys open. It's a consistent man beater that we see both in the college and pro game, and he does a great job of navigating that, whether running over the top of one of those routes coming from the opposite side of the field or running underneath some traffic when he's in zone if he is covering a route combination. So I think he does some really good things to take pursuit angles to the football, to be where he needs to be at the point of catch. So that's something else I liked on film with him. Willing tackler. He's willing to come in and mix it up. He's willing to be physical. That's another one of those things in the slot that you got to be able to be feisty and physical because you're closer to the action than the boundary corner is. So if a run play comes your way, if they actually look to spread you out and then want to run it, you're going to have more of an opportunity to get to that ball carrier first as a slot corner than one of the boundary corners. So especially if it's to your side. So you got to be a willing participant in the run game, and Aaron Robinson is definitely that. He's a guy that can blitz. They did blitz him at UCF, even though he does not have a sack credited to him. With that kind of speed, he's a guy that can get back there and cause a problem. I think he could do a better job of timing it up and disguising it. But, he didn't get as many opportunities to blitz as I would have liked to have seen, at least the games that I watched. So I did see him blitz, and I do think he can be a problem with the kind of speed, the closing speed that he does have. I'd like to see him in that element a little bit more often. And then positional flex is his last strength. This is a guy that played outside and inside, and you see him a lot outside in 2020. In 2019, he was more primarily a slot defender, which is where he had his best success with the 3 interceptions. I think he's more of a slot option at the next level, personally, myself. But we'll see what happens. It's good to know that he is capable of doing both things, and it gives you a little bit more flexibility as a defensive coordinator and on your roster as well, knowing that this guy can do both things. But I think where his money is ultimately going to be made and his sticking power may lie in this league is inside as a slot defender. Weaknesses: he doesn't seem to always play to his timed speed. So he's a 4.39 athlete, but there are times where he gets aggressive at the line of scrimmage and a guy gives him a stick inside and then a release to the outside, and he's lost in the sauce for a second. And then you're expecting this immediate recovery because he's a 4.39 guy and the guy that he's chasing is far from it, and yet he can't get back on top of that defender, or at least get back into the hip pocket of that defender and be in phase. So he's in a big time trail technique, but a little bit further behind than you would like. And I just don't see that acceleration that I thought I would see from on deeper routes. Again, when he's going across the field, he does a great job of closing on routes, but I don't know if he always plays to that time speed. It's weird, but I don't always see it from Aaron Robinson. Isn't quiet at the line of scrimmage. And I talk about this with all the elite corners in this draft class, whether it's Caleb Farley or Patrick Surtain II. You see the quietness at the line of scrimmage where their engines just run quiet and you don't even know that they've started it up. It's just so quiet, meaning they're in their stance and that receiver wants to give them all of these head and shoulder fakes. They want to give them all the dandruff in the world, and they're doing all of this gyrating and jumping around, and they're sticking outside, they're sticking inside, and they don't know which way, and they're just watching them, and they're not reacting to any of it. And then when that receiver finally commits to either an outside or an inside release, that's when they make their move. That's what you want as a cornerback. That's what you want to see your cornerback do. You don't want to see him going at first movement. Okay, this guy, he's stuck to the outside, so now I'm going to open up my hips and I'm going to try to force him towards the sidelines, or in the case of a slot receiver, I'm going to try to force him over the middle of the field and run with him. No, you want to wait until he declares whether he's releasing outside or inside, and then you make your move. He makes his move at first movement. So if you stick him inside because you want to open up outside, you got him. He's going to open up his hips inside. He's going to turn inside. And now he's got to turn all the way around to run, or he's got to turn in the opposite direction, which you don't want your cornerback doing. And now all of a sudden he's behind 2 or 3 steps. And you see that with him quite a bit, whether he's inside or outside. That's something he's going to have to clean up because he gets beat off the line of scrimmage way too often because he doesn't make the receiver declare. He is too impatient and wants to open up his hips at first movement, and that'll get you beat 9 times out of 10 at the cornerback position. Doesn't always seem in tune to what route combinations are being run. So he's one of these guys that when you get a myriad of routes run at him and he's in zone coverage specifically, he's at a loss sometimes. So I'll give you an example. I'm watching him, I want to say it was Houston in 2020, and he's in his coverage is in the flats, okay? And he's sitting there, it's almost like a cover 2 type of coverage. Maybe even cover 3, depending on his responsibility. He may have just the flats. And so he's watching the receiver who just kind of stands at the line of scrimmage as the default de facto check down. He's just standing there. And you don't need to drift towards that guy to make the quarterback turn him down. You want the quarterback to throw it to him. What you don't want is a guy who's running a 5 to 7 yard stop or 10 back to 8 comeback to be open behind you because you're decided that you're gonna roll up on the receiver that never left the line of scrimmage. You don't need to hug up on that guy. Kind of drift a bit. Keep him in your line of sight. Make sure you don't go too far away so that check down becomes an 8 yard gain. But you kind of want to midpoint both of those guys. And he doesn't understand that, yeah, the reason this guy's standing there is because there's a route more likely than not developing right behind you. And you don't need to sink. I want you to sink underneath that route. I don't need you to hug up on this guy standing at or behind the line of scrimmage. And so it's just little nuances like that where you say, okay, yeah, he doesn't quite get it. He's not seeing what they're trying to do to him. He doesn't have that understanding, because there are a couple of times I'm thinking he could either pick this off or have at least a deflection, but he just has no clue what's going on around him. Not a consistent LLCer. You know, that's one of my pet peeves. If you're a cornerback, you've got to look back for the football, because if you're 15 or 30 or 45 yards down the field and you don't look back for the ball, well, guess what? You can't locate it. You can't locate what you don't even know is coming. And you can contest without looking. The DBs do it all the time, but you're more susceptible to picking up a penalty, and you're less likely to get an interception if you don't even know where the ball is. So look, locate, and contest is what I consider an LLCer, and those are the components of it. And he didn't always do that down the field. You know, he's one of those guys that panics when he's down the field. And, you know, some of this is taught technique. And that's why I don't really like to always kill guys for this. But I want the guys that are going to look for the football. And he's one of those guys that doesn't necessarily look back for the ball. And sometimes it's taught. When you're in trail technique, you can't look back because you're beaten. You know, you're behind that receiver. And so you don't have time to turn around and locate the ball. Just get your hands up. But in any event, he doesn't do that enough for me. He doesn't look for the football. He doesn't locate it and then contest it. He's just a lot of times just getting his hands up like, hey, hopefully I'm in the way. And then he missed 3 games in 2018 due to a concussion. The very first play of the game on kickoffs, he sustains a concussion, misses 3 games in 2018. That's on the Carfax. Anytime you get a concussion that's severe enough to have a guy out for 3 weeks, it's something worth noting. So I just wanted to throw that out there as well. But at the end of the day, I actually like Aaron Robinson a lot. I think this guy has some talent. Obviously, he was recruited by Alabama, so that tells you that he had some talent. And I think there is value here. You know, a guy that I think is more likely than not a slot corner, but we'll see what the Giants decide to do. They may say, hey, we like his skill set outside. Okay, we'll see what happens. Bottom line is, I think you got yourself a quality football player here. My player comp, think Kendall Fuller. That's the guy I kind of see him as. I remember Kendall Fuller coming out of Virginia Tech, drafted by Washington in the 3rd round. Wasn't sure, a little handsy underneath, but always right there, which Aaron Robinson is usually right there. Wasn't sure if he was more of a slot guy or you know, a boundary. At Vatech, Fuller was more of a boundary guy. He comes into the league and they transition him inside, and he turns into one of the best nickel corners in all of football before going back out to the boundary. And he had some positional flex, goes to Kansas City, plays some safety, comes back to Washington. Now he's a boundary again. Who knows what they'll do with him this upcoming season. But I see a lot of those same traits in Aaron Robinson. Same size, same kind of speed, same question I'm asking myself. Is this guy a boundary or is he a nickel? I think he's more of a nickel, much like Kendall Fuller, but we will see. In the 3rd round, 71st pick overall, cornerback or defensive back out of UCF, Aaron Robinson for me is a 3. I think he's got some upside and some real potential, but I want to see what the Giants do with him, where they play him, and how he continues to develop. We go to the 4th round for the New York Football Giants, 116th pick overall, edge rusher out of Northern Iowa, Ellerson G. Smith is the pick. This was a guy that I first ran into watching Trey Lance tape, and I'm watching the tape from 2019, and there's this long guy that just continues to be in the backfield, never getting a sack, but just always around, disrupting and getting in the way. And I also was watching 2 of their linemen. Volson is a guard that got drafted, and they also had Dylan Radons drafted at the tackle position. So I watched that game a number of times for different reasons, and I kept seeing Ellerson Smith. And I'm saying to myself, well, this guy is something else. And it made sense after watching those games and then realizing that this is a draftable prospect as well. And looking at his numbers from that year, I saw how he was able to provide that kind of pressure. 15 games in 2019, 21 and a half tackles for loss, 14 sacks, 5 forced fumbles, and 2 4 pass breakups, and 2 block kicks with that length, all in 2019. So this guy can do a little bit of everything at 6'6", 252 pounds. He tested really well at the Northern Iowa Pro Day. 34-inch arms, which tells you this guy's got vines for arms. And you can see it when you watch him on tape. 4.69 40, which is an excellent time for a guy his size. 41.5-inch vertical, which is ridiculous. And a 10.7 broad. So you're dealing with an athlete here. And he used to be a small guy, and he still kept a lot of that small guy athleticism, which bodes well for him moving forward. So overall, this guy had 22 sacks. His last 2 years at Northern Iowa were really productive, 7.5, and then the 14 in 2019. So this is a guy that comes in with the ability to do some things. Let's talk about Ellerson G. Smith and what he brings to the table. Strengths. He came to Northern Iowa at 200 pounds. So he's at 252 right now. That guy gained 52 pounds, and he's still continuing to grow, and he still needs to put on more muscle mass. The thing about his frame is, even if he gains more weight, I don't think it's ever going to change the layout of his frame. I think he's going to be a angular, long, lanky type of guy. I don't think he'll be lean. He'll never be overly muscular, but he still needs to get a little bit more stout. But that said, to transform his body from a 200-pound guy to a 252-pound man, from a 200-pound boy essentially to a 252-pound man, is something else. And I still think he's got a little ways to go, but that's an amazing transformation there. Extremely long frame. I talked about the 34-inch arms. That is a really great tool to have in your bag that most guys don't have as an edge rusher. I talked about Aziz Ogilari and how he has shorter arms. Well, Ellerson G. Smith has enough length in terms of arms and wingspan for the both of them. So his reach, to me, is his biggest attribute to this point, and we'll talk about that here in a second. Extremely good get off on the snap. So he's one of those guys that times it up really well. In obvious passing situations, he gets a head start. It's almost as if he knows, the snap count, or he's watching the play clock and knowing, hey, you got to snap it. You only got 1 second left, and he's getting off. That's kind of the get off you get from him on an obvious passing situation. You watch him in some late game situations. I was able to watch him in the Idaho State game. He had 3 sacks in that football game. And you're watching at the end of that game, Idaho State had been leading that entire game. It's like, 10-6 for the longest time, that their offense couldn't get anything going. And they score a touchdown late in that ball game, take the lead 13-10, something along those lines. I think it might have even been like, it was like 13-7 or something like that late in the game. It was like 7-6 for the longest time. Whatever the case may be, they needed a touchdown late, did Idaho State, and it was obvious passing situation. They had to throw it, and Ellerson G. Smith, he knew that, so he was getting off the snap quickly, and he got a sack late in that game to really help seal the deal. So his snap get off is outstanding. Eats up tons of green with huge strides and closes quickly. So in addition to his long arms, he's got long legs, and he has massive strides. And one of those 3 sacks against Idaho State, he had to track the quarterback down, who had some wheels on him. He was not a slow quarterback. He could actually move. And Ellerson G. Smith had to go track him down from one side of the field to the other. And it was him and that quarterback probably saying, damn, he got here quick. I'm thinking I'm getting away from this dude. And those long legs and long strides ate up that green turf. And he was able to dive and get a piece of the ankle and track that quarterback down. So he's a guy that closes quickly. So you're in the pocket. You think you got an extra, fraction of a second. And all of a sudden, here comes Ellerson Smith to smash you that quickly because he gets there in a hurry. Stronger than he appears. Has some jolt in his hands. So he's not the biggest guy, obviously, in the world. He's not the stoutest at the point of attack. We'll talk about that. However, when he does decide to transfer and convert speed to power, that does actually exist. And it's because he's got heavy hands. And he's able to really, he's deceptive in the way he looks. You look at this guy, and there's no way this guy's going to bench press me. There's no way this guy's going to drive me back. So as an offensive tackle, you're thinking, I just got to prepare for the speed. This gangly guy is probably going to try to run around me. And then he puts his hands in your chest. And you're like, whoa, wait a minute. Where is this coming from? So he's got a little bit of shock and awe and violence in his hands. And that's something else that could help him. But again, it's one thing to do that against, FCS tackles. It's another thing to do that against trained killers at the NFL level at the left and right tackle positions. We'll see if he's able to continue to do some of those things. Outstanding hand quickness with some real latch and snatch qualities. So one of my favorite moves to see a young pass rusher have in his tool belt that has a length advantage or a long wingspan is the latch and snatch. I also like to see guys utilize the pole vault, which is, the one-arm stab, some people call it. Whatever you call it, whatever. I call it the long arm of the law. Some people call it the pole vault. Whatever the case may be, you just take one arm and you just stick it in a guy's chest and you just jack him up. Or you stick it in his shoulder, whatever floats your boat. But one arm is longer than two, always. That's always the case. When you're dunking, you see people dunk who really can't dunk all that great. They dunk with one hand. Why? Because you can get more reach on one arm than you can with two. So he doesn't have a pole vault. He doesn't have a long arm of the law. But what he does have is a latch and snatch, which is when a guy grabs you, shakes you, engages, and then snatches you towards them, which catapults and vaults them towards their target, which is the quarterback or the running back, whomever the case may be. He has a really good latch and snatch move where he grabs the tackle, it looks like he's just trying to engage, and then he snatches them towards him, which thrusts him towards the quarterback in the opposite direction. That's one of my favorite moves any pass rusher can use, especially if you got length. And then he's got outstanding hand quickness. A lot of his wins to the quarterback stem from him just simply getting to the offensive lineman's body first. And as that lineman tries to punch or they try to get in his chest, he just slaps their hands down immediately. Quick hands. And that allows him to get around the corner, turn the edge, and get to the quarterback. So he's got really good hand quickness and some real latch and snatch qualities. Weaknesses. He's got a gangly frame that needs further stoutness. Obviously, I've already addressed that, and you can look at him and tell he looks like he is a tight end. He looks like Mike Gesicki in terms of his body type. Nobody's afraid of the way this guy looks, but a lot of people weren't afraid of Aldon Smith and the way he looked either, and then he came in the league and got 15 and a half sacks in his rookie season. And I'm not saying that's what Ellerson G. Smith is going to do. However, don't let the frame fool you, but he does need to get a little bit bigger and stouter. Why? Because this next weakness is really tied to his frame. Can be manhandled at the point of attack. Some of that is him standing straight up. He's a big dude at 6'6", and the natural inclination for a big edge rusher is to stand straight up out of his stance. Defensive tackle, same thing. Guys stand straight up. You allow a tackle or a guard or some interior offensive lineman that's shorter than you to get up under your pads, and now they're winning the leverage battle that you hear in the NFL all the time. Low man wins. That is a real idiom. That's a real thing, and it exists in the run game especially, and there are times where he just gets completely wiped out in the run game, and it's not always tackles either. It's bona fide blocking tight ends will get in this guy's chest and erase him and wipe him out of an entire play. So he's got to get stronger, especially at the point of attack, if he wants to be a three-down player. Right now, he's more of a situational pass rusher, and he's going to have to continue to grow. Needs more rush variety. Right now, he's got 3 moves, and normally 3 moves is all you need. Really 2 if you got a dominant and 1. If you got a dominant fastball, all you need is a changeup off the fastball. But if you got 3 moves, usually that's pretty damn good. Right now, he's got STP, which is speed to power, latch and snatch, which I love, and speed. To me, 2 of those immediately get negated at the NFL level because you're no longer playing against FCS tackles, which we'll talk about here in a second. But I think the STP, the speed to power, that gets negated at the next level. Even though I think he does have a little jolt to his hands, I think that gets eliminated at the next level. He's not going to surprise these tackles. They're not going to be, being blown back and driven into the quarterback's lap by Ellerson G. Smith just because, he's got a little bit of jolt in his hands. Not when they're going up against elite pass rushers all the time. And then his speed, it's minimal speed. It's not dynamic, game-changing speed off the edge. It's okay speed. It's average. And at the FCS level, it looks elite because they don't see this kind of player all the time. They're not playing against NFL caliber guys, which Ellerson G. Smith is. So when they see it, it looks blazing to them. But it's not dynamic speed by any stretch of the imagination. Tackles will be able to gobble that up and put him to sleep. So I think those two get negated. I think the latch and snatch is legit. That's the one that's going to carry over and transfer to the next level. But he's going to have to get a spin move. He's going to have to develop a crossover, hard outside, back inside, cross that guy up, get to the inside. That's the easiest, most direct route to the quarterback anyway. That should be in every pass rusher's arsenal is a crossover, hard outside, back inside. Cross that guy up, get him to open up his hips by going hard outside and go inside, and he can't turn and redirect fast enough to wash you inside, and now you got a direct beat to the quarterback. Like, that should be in every pass rusher's arsenal. It's not currently in Ellerson G. Smith's, and nor did it need to be because obviously with 14 sacks in 2019, those three moves that I just referenced, the STP, the latch and snatch, and the speed were all working. So he's going to have to get better, more rush variety in his tool belt. And then level of competition. At the end of the day, I don't like to harp on this because I only have one prerequisite for guys that go to smaller schools, and that's dominate the competition. You can only play who they put in front of you. You go to UNI, all right, dominate Idaho State, okay? Dominate, all the guys that dominate South Dakota State, dominate North Dakota State, dominate the competition that they put in front of you. And for the most part, that's what he did. So I got no problems with that. But you're not playing up against the Idaho State left tackle anymore. And I watched that game and I'm thinking, this left tackle stinks. Is he just a guy? I mean, seriously. This guy was all out of sorts, and Ellerson G. Smith wasn't doing anything that significant, and he was just all out of whack. So he'll definitely see much better competition at the NFL level, but that goes without saying. Player comp. Think Max Crosby, the third or fourth round pick of the Vegas Raiders a few drafts ago, out of Eastern Michigan. Big, long, athletic edge rusher that was raw as the day was long and needed to develop, came into the league, and really his rookie season has been his best to this date. I think he had like 6 or 7 sacks in his rookie season. And I could see Ellerson G. Smith, if he can find a way to make this roster or, get an opportunity late in the season, whatever the case may be. I could see him showing some signs and flashes. Usually a fourth-round pick makes your squad. I see him having an opportunity to come and compete. This is a position of need for the Giants. Obviously, you drafted Aziz Ogilari in the second. Now you're doubling up here and drafted Ellerson G. Smith in the fourth, which tells you needed more edge rushing presence. Hopefully, he's able to provide that for you. We'll see what he brings to the table. But in the fourth round, 116th overall selection, edge rusher out of Northern Iowa, Ellerson G. Smith for me is a 3. We move on to the 6th round. 196th pick overall, running back out of Arizona, Gary Brightwell is the pick. And, when I first saw his frame, I thought to myself, oh, he's probably a scat back. Probably one of these guys you throw in the game on third downs, and he can run really, really fast. And initially, when you see his frame, he's well put together. But I looked at his numbers, and quickly I realized, okay, he has to be a third down back because he never had a season with more than 525 yards rushing, and he never had a season of more than 91 carries. So, and he wasn't much of a pass catcher out of the backfield. So I said he's got to be a third down back. First thing that came to my mind. And that's exactly what he is, which makes a ton of sense because the Giants don't need a bell cow. They got one already. They went out and got Devontae Booker in free agency, which is, I think, a very shrewd move after seeing what happened with Saquon Barkley last year and having to deal with Wayne Gallman and the Alfred Morrises of the world and all of the bevy of backs, having to go get Devontae Freeman and all the things that you had to do last year to supplement the position after losing Barkley. Going out and getting Devontae Booker and adding a guy like Gary Brightwell, I think, is a very smart move on the part of the Giants. So 5'11", 218 pounds out of Arizona. 27 games he played in, 245 total rushes over 3 years for 1,305 yards, average 5.37 yards per tote in his career, 9 touchdowns for his career on the ground, another 1 touchdown as a receiver on 19 catches for 121 yards. So again, not a massive pass catcher out of the backfield. Doesn't mean he can't do it. I think he was just underutilized in that regard. I think that his receiving game needs a little bit more work, but doesn't mean he cannot do it. So strengths: thick, solidly built frame at 5'11", nearly 220 pounds. He's built to withstand the rigors of the NFL game, and he's got a well-constructed frame from top to bottom. He's not, top heavy with small, stick-like legs. He's thick throughout and paws. And so he looks the part of an NFL running back. Very quick feet, can make sharp cuts. This is his best attribute right now to date is you get him in a tight, confined space, and he will cut it back like nobody's business, stick his foot in the ground, and cut back on a dime on somebody and leave them in his wake. And you watch him do that in a number of games. Against USC, you watch him do that. Against Colorado, he's got a hell of a touchdown run early in that ball game where he cuts back like 4 times on the same play and ends up scoring a touchdown. Phenomenal run. And that's what he does. He's got the innate ability to just stick his foot in the ground and cut it back very, very quickly. Physical, aggressive, downhill style. That's something that I think a lot of evaluators love about him is he's got a no-nonsense running style. He'll hit it hard downhill. I think sometimes it's to his detriment, however, because he's not as patient, doesn't see things develop. But he does get downhill in a hurry, and he is physical, and he plays with a level of reckless abandon that you want to see from a running back. He will take on defenders, things of that nature, try to get every single yard that's available. But he does have a physical style, but it can be a gift and a curse. Has MYM ability, which is make you miss ability. Again, he's not a juke you type of guy. He's not a break you down, spin move, any of that stuff. He's more of a, hey, I'm going to just cut it back. And if you're not sound, if you're coming up a little reckless, I'm going to stick my foot in the ground, cut it back, and you just going to keep on going. So he does have that ability out in space to make people miss. Willing and able-bodied in pass pro. I think he can get a little bit better in pass protection, but I'm actually really impressed with what he's capable of doing. He's not afraid to stick his nose in there. He's not one of these guys that just wants to duck down and cut everybody. He'll stick his face in there, and sometimes he'll get obliterated. But in getting obliterated, he still got that quarterback that fraction of a second he needed to deliver the football. He does seem to know his responsibilities, knows look, we got jet protection, but it's 5 to block. In jet protection, a lot of times it's 6-man, which means the running back's responsible. But if they're only bringing 4 and we got 6, you don't need me back here. I'm going to get out into the route. He seems to understand that concept as well. So I like him in pass pro as a third down back. I think he is a guy that does need to get a little bit better picking up blitzes sometimes and knowing his responsibility there. But from all indications of what I've seen in the games that I watched, he seemed to be very, very capable in pass pro situations. Shows good patience in the screen game. That's his last attribute. He does a good job in the screen game. And a lot of his receptions, he only had 19 in his career, came via the screen game. Weaknesses: doesn't possess home run speed. So on tape, when you watch him, you can clearly see that he is not a speed demon. 4.62 40, 34.5-inch vert, 9.10 broad, which tells you there's really a lack of explosion here from Gary Brightwell. Has some quicks, but doesn't have the explosive long distance speed. Again, Saquon Barkley has enough of that to spread around for all the running backs in the backfield. That includes Devontae Booker, who himself is not a speed demon either. So you don't have anyone in that backfield that's going to hit a home run other than Saquon Barkley at this point, and Gary Brightwell isn't bringing any more speed to the backfield. Not a threat as a pass catcher despite being a third down back. So really what he has shown is he's a third down back. I don't think he's a first and second down rock toter. I think he's more of a guy that you bring in on 3rd and 6 that can pick up the blitz, and get out into the route. And it's crazy because I think he can catch the football better and more. He didn't get a lot of opportunities, but normally if you're in on 3rd downs is because you're also a dynamic receiver out of the backfield. Well, I can't say that about Gary Brightwell because he didn't catch a lot of balls in the games that I watched. All his catches were on screen passes. They didn't ask him to go out on any routes. He didn't run any Texas or arrow routes. He didn't run any choice routes or any option routes out of the backfield. It was either a flare or it was a check down or it was a screen. So they didn't ask a lot of him, and they didn't give him a lot of opportunities in the pass game. So to me, he's underdeveloped as a pass catcher right now. Average to a below average vision. I don't think he has tremendous vision at all whatsoever. Like I said, a lot of times he gets the football and he just goes. He doesn't allow things to develop. He isn't setting anything up to cut it back. He just goes. And even if that means sticking his head down into the line and running into a brick wall of defenders instead of waiting and trying to see if something's going to develop or pressing the line of scrimmage to see if something opens up, he just goes. I remember one particular carry against, I want to say it was Colorado. There's a gaping hole to the outside. If he just has a jump cut and the vision to see it, he'd get outside and there probably was a good 15 to 20 yards of real estate for him to explore. And instead, he just put his head down, ran to the back of his offensive linemen who were being stood up at the point of attack, and he may have gotten a yard or two. And so I just don't think the vision for him is there. And then he's a monotone runner. There are no gear shifts here. Even when he gets out into space, he can't kick it into that next gear. He's a 4.62 guy. Everything looks the same from the time he gets the football, and if he happens to get to the second level, it all looks the same. He'll step on the gas once he gets it, and if he's able to break through that first wave of defenders, there isn't another gear for him to shift into. That same gear that he used to get through the first wave is the same gear he's going to use at the second and potentially the third level. And so, again, it kind of just harkens back to there's no home run speed here, but that's okay. That's not his game. He did have 3 fumbles this year, 5 fumbles this year. He lost 3 of them. And he had 3 in one game against Arizona State, but I watched that game because I was curious. I saw 3 fumbles in one game. I'm like, is this guy a fumbler? 2 of them were on the exchange with the quarterback that really wasn't his fault. And then the last fumble came on a spin where he literally got the football, and before he could even make a move, he was getting devoured in the backfield. He tried to spin away, and he got clobbered, and the ball came out. So I don't really put any of those fumbles. He's not really a fumbler. So that's not something that I even needed to put down in his weakness category. But it is something worth mentioning. If you were to see the 3 fumbles against Arizona State, you're thinking, what the hell? That's what happens. So my player comp for him is coincidentally enough, a guy that just left you in free agency, went to the 49ers, but actually played well for you last year, and Wayne Gallman. Look, Gallman was never a third down back, and that's more of what Gary Brightwell is, but I think their skill set is very similar. Gallman was an upright runner. Gary Brightwell, not as upright, but Gallman was about 6 feet tall. They're not that far away in height. Obviously Gallman only 1 inch taller. Similar size. I think Gallman is 220. This guy's 218, so similar size. But they're similar monotone runners. Gallman didn't have another gear. Gallman didn't have tremendous vision. Gallman didn't have tremendous agility. Even though this guy can make some cuts on a dime, Gallman wasn't really making anybody miss in space. He was more of a physical runner. That's what Gary Brightwell is. A lot of their game kind of mirrors one another. The only difference is Brightwell can stick his foot in the ground and cut back, and that's not something that Wayne Gallman necessarily did with great efficiency. But I think their games are very similar. And for me, in the 6th round, 196 pick overall, running back out of Arizona, Gary Brightwell, for me, is a 3. I think I like this guy a lot more than I thought I was going to, and I think he does add value to the Giants' backfield. We wrap up this Giants draft in the 6th round, 201st pick overall. Defensive back out of Oklahoma State, Rodarius Williams is the pick. I do not like this pick as much. I won't spend a ton of time on this selection as it is your final selection in this draft. Quickly give you some numbers and we'll move on. He's 6 feet, 189 pounds. He's the brother of Greedy Williams, who was drafted in the 2nd round by the Cleveland Browns out of LSU. Played in 48 consecutive games as a starter at Oklahoma State, in which he amassed 169 tackles. 5.5 of them were for losses. No sacks, 1 forced fumble, 31 pass breakups, only 2 interceptions, both of which came in the 2018 season. Strengths: quality size and length. At 6 feet, $190 or so, with some solidly proportioned arms. He's got what you're looking for outside as a boundary corner. Can be disruptive at the line of scrimmage. He's not always disruptive, but when he's at his best is in press coverage at the line of scrimmage, using his length to be disruptive and disrupt the timing and rhythm of the route for the receiver and quarterback. Not too shabby job of staying in phase down the field, although he can be a little bit handsy to do so. He's one of those guys that always feels the need to touch somebody. Always got his hand around the waist, or always got his hands on the shoulder, or grabbing some cloth. Like, dude, you're doing a great job. You're right there. You don't need to do that, but he does a great job of staying in phase down the field. I can give him credit in all the games I watched. I went all the way back to 18 with him, got some 19 film, and then got a couple games in 2020. He does a really good job running down the field with receivers. So he will locate and contest, which is one of my prerequisites. He doesn't always do this, but especially down the field, he does a great job of trying to locate the football. 48 consecutive starts at Oklahoma State, so you see the durability there. And then he's got bloodlines, as I mentioned. His brother is Andres Greedy Williams, so that just kind of runs in their bloodlines, that athleticism and the ability to play ball. Weaknesses: doesn't have immediate feet or sudden change of direction. So this is a guy that when he does come up to the line of scrimmage and he wants to be aggressive, if he doesn't get off a quality jam, he's going to get beaten off the line of scrimmage. And he's not a 4-4 guy. He's a 4-5 guy. So he's not going, and he's got some length, but it's not, difference-making length to where he can afford to lose a couple steps at the line of scrimmage. And when he plays off, and so let's get to that. Lacks instincts and agility to close from off coverage. When he plays off man or he's playing in zone, he's not a click and close guy. He's not going to stick his foot and drive downhill and make a play on the ball. He doesn't seem to see what's happening in front of him quick enough, process it quick enough to make plays if he's playing from off coverage. So you usually get free lunch and free food underneath with him. If he's playing 7 to 10 yards off the ball, you're going to get an easy completion. If you run at him hard and you stop at 7 yards, he's going to be 13, 15 yards off, and you're going to get an easy completion. And there's something else that really bothers me with him. Passive-aggressive demeanor towards physicality. Like, he really doesn't want to tackle anybody, honestly speaking. He only does it out of necessity, but there are some corners that they want to get into action. If a guy is dragging a couple of defenders on their team, they're going to come in there, throw a shoulder around, or they're going to try to push that guy back. Or if a guy is threatening them outside, but the linebacker's coming, they're still going to try to get the tackle and clean him up with the linebacker. He's one of those dudes that's just watching. He is a bystander. Hey, y'all look like y'all got it. Y'all don't need me. Even though this guy is dragging defenders for an additional 2 yards, he's still watching. He doesn't want to get in there. He doesn't want to get his hands dirty. When guys catch the football, he's more of a I'm going to push you out of bounds guy. He's not trying to hit anybody. He's so impervious to contact. It annoyed me watching. It really did. Like, he's one of those guys that he has a front row seat. That bothers me. He can be beaten off the line of scrimmage with a quality release and can be baited on first movement. So similar to the guy I talked about that you drafted earlier, Aaron Robinson, doesn't have the patience required at the line of scrimmage to allow a guy to show his hand. As a receiver, you want to win at the line of scrimmage. One of the best guys in the league right now doing it is Devontae Adams. Why? Because he does his work early. At the line of scrimmage, he's going to stem you. He's going to give you a couple of stutters and a couple of sticks. And if you're not careful, he's going to give you an outside stick. You're going to turn your outside. You're going to open up your hips, and he's going to go inside, and he's going to win on a slant. Now you're 3 yards behind him on a slant, and he's catching it, and he's putting pressure on your safety. Rodarius Williams is one of those guys you're going to be able to beat off the line of scrimmage because he goes on first movement. So if you stem him inside because you want to run a fade to the outside, so he thinks you're running a shallow cross, and now he's ready to run. Boom, you cross him over. Now he's got his feet tangled up. He's got to turn all the way around, and now you're going up the field on a wheel route, or you're going up the field on a fade route towards the sideline. So to me, a quality release, if you got any kind of skill from a release standpoint, you're going to eat this guy alive. And then he can be very handsy. He's a guy that wants to, he's hugging and tugging and loving. You know, he can't keep his hands to himself, you know. And I think it's going to get him in trouble at the next level. Even when he's in great position, he still doesn't trust his abilities enough to take his hands off of somebody. Like, stop touching people. I tell the young youth of America this all the time. Stop touching people. Respect people's personal space. There's a time to be disrespectful as a corner. That time is 5 yards and in to the line of scrimmage. After that period, you got to respect people's personal space. He doesn't do that. He wants to be all on top of people, touching them, grabbing them, tugging them, hugging them, loving them. You can't do that down the field. And I think he's going to get penalized for it at the next level. My comp for him is a guy that was drafted just a year ago by the Chicago Bears out of Georgia State in the 5th round. Kendall Vildor out of Georgia State is the guy I comp Rodarius Williams to. I see a lot of similar traits and attributes, similar size, similar demeanor towards physicality, not necessary. I think Kendall Vildor was a little bit more physical, but he really didn't want the smoke in the run game and in supporting his guys either. And didn't have a ton of ball production. Neither does Rodarius Williams. Guys drive me nuts that have all of these pass breakups, but don't have a lot of ball production, because I guarantee you, of these 31 pass breakups, he probably could have caught 5 or 6 of them, and he just didn't. I don't think he has great hands. I'm watching him against Oklahoma in 2019, and he undercuts a route beautifully in breaking route. And the ball's right there. Goes right through his damn hands. Now, he tips it, goes through his hands, and it goes to the safety who picks it off, but he should have caught the damn ball. So 31 pass breakups, that's nice. How about you pick a few of them off, though? So that's another thing I don't really love. But at the end of the day, he's a 6th round pick, so I'm not going to go too hard on him. At the end of the day, 6th round, 201st pick overall. Rodarius Williams out of Oklahoma State for me is a 2. Solid corner that is going to come in and compete. Better be able to play some special teams. He better be more physical than the shit I saw on tape. And maybe it was just the games I watched, but I didn't see a guy that really wanted any smoke in the run game. Wasn't a physical enough defender for me, and doesn't have enough ball production. And he can be really handsy down the field. And he can be beat off the line of scrimmage. I don't love Rodarius Williams, but I've seen worse. I've seen worse. So that's going to complete the Giants draft. Let's take a look at what they did and the damage done here. 1st round, wide receiver Kadarius Toney, a 5. 2nd round, edge rusher Aziz Ogilari, a 4. 3rd round, defensive back Aaron Robinson, a 3. Same can be said for your 4th round selection, edge rusher Ellerson G. Smith out of Northern Iowa. 5th pick in the draft, 6th round, Gary Brightwell, running back out of Arizona, a 3. And to wrap up the draft in the 6th round, Rodarius Williams, defensive back, not defensive lineman, defensive back out of Oak State. He was a 2. You total all of that up, it's a 20 for the Giants. And you divide by the number of picks, which was 6, you get a 3.33 final score for the New York Giants in their draft wrap-up series for 2021. All in all, thought it was a really quality draft by the Giants. impressed by what they were able to do. And I think it's a perfect culmination of what I thought was a strong offseason for GM Dave Gettleman. They've positioned themselves to compete in the NFC East this year. And Daniel Jones has to take a big step, but also this defense got some more players. Let's see what they're able to do as well. So that's going to do it for me, your man Louie T. If you like this content, you like this video, please subscribe to the Louie T Network for more great content here on the Louie T Network. That's going to do it for me, your man Louie T. Get off the bench, get in the game, and kick it with me, your man Louie T. Until next time, have a good one.